Okay. All right. So, hello to everyone who is watching us today. Myself and Amy Gruber, I'm Lindsay King, and I am one of the clinical psychologists at the Springfield, Oregon Riverbend Bariatric Surgery Clinic. And I am co-hosting today with Amy Gruber, and I will let her introduce herself.
I'm Amy Gruber. I'm also a clinical psychologist up here in Vancouver, Washington at the Specialties Clinic.
And we are beginning a webinar series for our pre and our post-op bariatric patients. We have decided on quite a few topics that we think would be very helpful and that we've heard from patients and clients have been struggles for them as they are trying to make health-related changes in their behaviors. And so our first webinar starts off with coping skills for emotional eating. And you'll notice that we are doing all kinds of things today. We do have a quote by Hippocrates. The quote does not use different pronouns, but I will. It talks about before you heal someone, ask them if they're willing to give up the things that made them sick. And we don't really necessarily think of emotional eating sometimes as something that is causing illness. But if it is done to the degree where it's working against your goals or it is causing you to put on more weight than what you want to, that's working against your health, then of course we would look at that as something that you'd want to change so that you can meet the goals that you want to meet. And we will next go over an overview um, of what we're going to talk with you guys about today.
So the topics that we have planned out in this webinar are going to be for emotional eating and head hunger. Really kind of learning to understand what emotional eating and head hunger are, as opposed to physical hunger, when your body's actually, having that need for food. And an important piece is the hunger scale to really help us to hone the skill about understanding the different kind of stages of hunger and like when to really catch your hunger at the right time. Um, so that's the next piece of how to tell the difference between emotional and physical hunger. When are you, being pulled towards food when there's something else going on, like whether it's some sort of emotional need or some sort of emotional reaction versus physical hunger when your body actually needs nutrition, needs fuel to keep on going. So, in addition to that, we're going to be talking about coping skills, how to kind of manage distraction behaviors, how to know when to pull your attention elsewhere, and self care, which is an important thing across the board for all of us, like how to really tend to ourselves. And then creating a treatment plan, thinking about, how to best proceed. What do you need? What are the elements that are going to be a part of the plan that's going to best support you in this process? This process is hard and it's different for everybody. So everyone's going to be able to have more of an individualized treatment plan. So we want to help you think about all these different elements, how they are unique to you, and then how do you make a unique plan to be able to tend to them.
All right, so like Amy said, the first thing that we're going to go over with you guys is emotional eating. And emotional eating is when a person consumes food to regulate or soothe their emotions. And I first off want to say that almost everyone I've ever met, including myself, emotionally eats from time to time. We all emotionally eat at a point for little things. We'll emotionally eat sometimes for reward, if we're sad or we're grieving, for stress, for boredom. Uh, Obviously, we'll eat when we're out, we're being social, for celebrations, things of that nature. And one of the reasons why we emotionally eat is because it actually does release what we call the feel good chemicals in our body, things like neurotransmitters or endorphins, neurotransmitters like dopamine or serotonin. And we are actually going to discuss the feel good chemicals and why we eat what we eat and crave what we do in our food and mood webinar, which will be upcoming as well. So be on the lookout for that. We'll talk about those things more. But for the most part, when people are using food for emotional purposes, there are certain things that most of us crave. And we call those the refined carbohydrates. Those are your sweets, your cookies, your cakes, your chocolate, or even the salty, savory carbohydrates, such as chips, breads, pastas, pizzas, things of that nature. You may also hear people say things like head hunger or emotional eating, and those things really are the same. Both of them lead people to emotionally eat. And so that's really what we're talking about when we say either emotional hunger or head hunger.
I don't think we realize like all of the psychological loading into food, like whether it's emotions or memories or family or finances or, celebrations like Lindsay was talking about. There's so many associations that are largely unconscious that will drive us or pull us towards emotional eating. And Lindsay and I were talking about this earlier, like Lindsay was saying on the Friday after work, driving home, it's like you want to reward yourself for making it through the week. And I appreciate you talking about, Lindsay, how this is something that we all deal with time to time. So I want to normalize it. And I think one of the things that Lindsay and I were talking about is really wanting to increase our self-awareness. We want to kind of help you understand the nuances of it so that you can be more informed and aware. Self-awareness is going to be one of the most important elements to support any of us through this process.
Definitely. All right. So let's see, what have we got on deck next? Amy.
All right. Physical hunger, sometimes referred to as belly hunger. This is when your stomach is going to be empty and your brain signals that you're hungry. It can often feel like an empty stomach or kind of like a gnawing sensation in the stomach. You might hear your stomach growling. Oftentimes, people might feel some fatigue, some anxiety, a little bit of a headache, some shakiness, maybe some irritability, aka hangriness, um, poor concentration. It's really kind of when your body is lacking in fuel. So those are kind of all the signs that your body needs energy. It needs a little bit of something to kind of keep it going. So the stages of hunger, this is where we talked about, the hunger scale. If we can increase our awareness about the different stages of hunger, it can help us by giving us insight into our hunger cues. So this can allow us from becoming too hungry, too starving, too hangry, which can lead to overeating. So we really want to be able to kind of track what are the first, like when's the first time you get that little kind of hunger pang? And at what point does it kind of shift into, maybe some fatigue or some shakiness, or you're having difficulty concentrating? So, really starting to kind of understand the different cues and stages and nuances of physical hunger.
Definitely. And that's where and Amy, you may hear this a lot too from your patients or clients. I have a lot of patients come in and they'll say that if they allow themselves to get to the point where they're too hungry, that tends to be when not only will they overeat, but they'll also choose more of those foods of convenience, the foods that they're trying probably not to eat or avoid when they're trying to get themselves healthier and maybe have that weight goal that they're working toward.
100%. I mean, I feel like that's the piece around, like poor concentration. I feel like we get when we're that hungry, we can't make good decisions. We, like you said, we just want what's, convenient and accessible and sounds good. And I find that when I get past the point of, like a comfortable hunger, that I feel like I need it like 2 or 3 times the amount of food than I would normally need. Like it's like you feel like you just want so much food because you're so hungry.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I do the exact same thing. And I think a lot of us do. And I
Yeah.
think that's, going back to what you said earlier about normalizing it so that when our patients or clients or those of you listening today, when you're thinking about it, we really want you to realize that many, many people struggle with this. This is not, you're not just struggling alone. And so we're giving you more of this insight so that you can start to gauge for yourself, how do you catch yourself before you get to the point where you're going to want to choose those foods of convenience and eat more than what you had planned to. And so here we go. We're going to talk about the hunger scale. So, all right. So This is one of the hunger scales. You can actually go online for yourself and Google and probably find different hunger scales. But this is just one that I found that really does outline for you where this is and kind of how to gauge for yourself when you're starting to get to that place where you don't want to get to so that you can keep those goals that you've made. So the number one is the one that Amy and I were just talking about, the starving, when people feel weak, when they feel dizzy, that time where we're probably going to choose the foods we're trying to avoid or eliminate, and we're going to tend to overeat. The second one is where you're very hungry. You might get the hangry, the cranky that Amy talked about. You have lower energy and you got lots of stomach growling. The third one, where you're pretty hungry and your stomach is growling a little bit. The fourth one is where you start to feel a little hungry. Like I'll feel this sometimes, at like 11, where I normally eat between 11:30 and 12, where I'm not starving, I don't really need to eat, but my body's starting to let me know, like, hey, you need to give us some fuel at some point pretty quickly. Number five is satisfied, where you're neither hungry or you're full. The sixth one is you're a little full, maybe even pleasantly full. Number seven, you feel a little uncomfortable, like maybe you've eaten a little bit more than what you need to. The eight is where people will report feeling stuffed. And most of my patients, at that point, they'll actually feel even more uncomfortable, like to the point where they know they've overeaten. This might even be the point where they start to beat up on themselves and get kind of judgmental about what they did with their food choices or how much they ate.
It's not a pleasant feeling, number 8, and I feel like with an unpleasant feeling, we tend to kind of have unpleasant thoughts. Um, so it's one of those things that there can be a little bit of an association there. And it's a place that, we all strive to avoid. And sometimes it happens, and we have to be conscious of when we get to that place, what are the thoughts associated with that place? We want to get curious, we want to learn from it, but we don't want to beat ourselves up. We got to be really careful about that piece.
Definitely. All right.
So this is an important one, right? This is like kind of the crux of what we want to talk about, how to tell the difference between emotional and physical hunger. So emotional hunger, it comes on suddenly. Like it's not there 1 minute and then all of a sudden it's there the next. Like you'll just kind of be sitting and you're like, ooh, I want a piece of chocolate right now. It's not like it's this kind of, and maybe I'm just describing what happens for me. It's not something that, like kind of slowly increases. It kind of hits you out of nowhere. And it demands food immediately. Like I need it right now. Um, and sometimes it's that feeling when it demands more food, like when you already feel stuffed. And it usually leads to cravings for specific foods. And this is what Lindsay was talking about earlier. The cakes and the cookies and ice cream and chocolate chips, pizza, fries, the things that are going to kind of give us that big dopamine hit, but aren't necessarily going to nourish our body, aren't going to kind of really fuel us in the way that we want to be fueled for the long run. That's what the food is energy. Um, so it might be the result of something that upset us. And, the example that we have here, it was so stressful at work today. Like, I can't wait to go home and eat pizza and relax. Or when we want to reward ourselves, like, oh gosh, I'm feeling good. I just lost 10 pounds and automatically thinking like, okay, I can go get that hamburger now. Um, so it's more of, emotionally driven, like some sort of need. There's a drive there, whether it's celebration or reward or wanting comfort or nurturance or stimulation. It could be like, based in any of those things versus physical hunger. So physical hunger develops over time. It's, kind of this slow sensation like Lindsay was describing at like, 11 in between 11 and 11:30, you'll start to kind of feel little pangs, like little cues, like, oh, like I'm starting to kind of feel a little hungry right now. Um, Your stomach might growl, you might feel a little fatigue, you might be kind of thinking, like what might I want to eat? As opposed to like, this pointed cue for, like pizza or fries or chocolate. And it tends to be more patient, like you can usually wait to eat, just like I'm describing. Like it's like this kind of slow build, and it's much more deliberate in choice. You have the ability to be able to stop when the content's gone or when you're feeling pleasantly full. It doesn't feel as like loaded or time sensitive at this stage. And you're open to a lot of different types of foods. You'll eat the last yogurt in the fridge, like even if it's the flavor that's not your favorite, because you're truly physically hungry. Your body needs fuel. It won't be so specific, like I need to eat this one thing or I'm not going to eat it all. And the result, it's truly the result of a physical need for fuel to keep the body and mind going.
Yeah. And so, all the stuff that Amy just talked about, and I also, again, I want to go back and I want to normalize that, you know, even if you are making a goal and you're trying to work toward this health related goal, maybe it's weight loss, maybe it's building muscle, maybe it's just maintaining weight, and you struggle or you are struggling for some reason with emotional eating, you will still get these cravings. You will still have these times where you're craving these types of food. And it doesn't mean you're not motivated. It doesn't mean that you don't want to make these changes. It just means that this is what the body sometimes does when we're emotional, we're having a hard time, maybe we haven't eaten in a while, like we said earlier, and we've let ourselves get to the point we're starving. So it's what we're saying is understanding and being able to tell this difference so that you can get to the place where you're starting to know these cues for yourself, and you'll be able to tell, like, well, wait a minute, I just ate about an hour ago, I'm having a really stressful day, I've had this craving for chocolate, that came out of nowhere. And then it's meant to be just an awareness, not a judgmental thing, but just being able to catch yourself and say, if my goal is that I want to maintain weight, maybe every once in a while it is fine to grab like a piece of chocolate. But if I'm doing it every time I'm emotional, I might be starting to work away from my goal. So being able to tell the difference is going to help you with the goals that you guys are working on.
Absolutely. That's the whole piece of like trying to improve your self awareness. We're wanting to impart knowledge so that you can kind of sit and self reflect. No judgment. You're going to hear us coming back to that piece again and again. Judgment's not helpful. It makes us feel badly about ourselves. And when we feel badly about ourselves, we don't want to do kind things for ourselves. So it's just information to be able to kind of get curious, self reflect, and wonder true hunger, physical hunger versus emotional hunger, head hunger.
Definitely. All right. Okay, so this is the reason you all came, right? Like, all right, get to the nitty gritty. So today we are going to talk about different coping skills and helpful behaviors that we feel will help you to try to change these behaviors that are related to emotional eating so you can start working toward the goals that you want. So coping skills are methods or strategies that a person uses to either deal with or decrease their unpleasant emotions in the moment as a way to change behavior, nurture themselves, those types of things. There are many different kinds of coping skills. We are actually going to focus today on the sensory coping skills. Like I said, many, many different kinds of coping skills, but the sensory ones I really enjoy and appreciate because food is very sensory. We we taste things, we smell things, we like textures of certain foods, we like the crunch of certain foods, we like if something's silky. We like the ding of a microwave or popcorn popping or the timer on the kitchen oven. And obviously, we like the smell of food. So food is very sensory. So if you're trying to change that behavior and you're also trying to maybe meet an emotional need, the sensory coping skills can be very, very helpful for you. So we're going to go over those. We're also going to talk about some distraction behaviors. Many of my patients struggle with boredom eating as well as emotional eating. And so distraction behaviors, almost any activity can distract you so that if you use food for boredom purposes, you can go and do some other activity and decrease that particular behavior of boredom eating as well. And then obviously self-care. Self-care is a wonderful thing. These are not the same as coping skills, although they do a lot of the same things. They help us feel better, but they're longer term strategies that focus on meeting your needs as well. And we're going to get into all of this and kind of give you more of a breakdown of everything as we go through.
Okay, let's jump into some of the sensory coping skills. So, when we're talking about sensory coping skills, we're talking about coping skills or tools that stimulate, like one of the five senses. We're wanting to be able to kind of like stimulate the five senses. So, with vision, you want to think about your eyes. Like what do your eyes want to be stimulated by? Walking in a pretty part of town, taking a look at nature. There's so much research about the impact of nature on the brain. It definitely has an impact on the central nervous system, mood, energy, motivation, and the visual aspect of it. Like oftentimes when you're in nature, you'll just automatically want to take a deep breath. Going into museum and looking at the art, there's different colors and approaches and different interpretations. So it's like candy for the eyes. Lighting a candle and watching the flame is so relaxing and soothing and like just such a sensual experience for the eyes. It creates an ambiance that's almost like magic. Flame can look like magic. Um, and looking at a book with beautiful photographs. When you're looking at a photograph of a certain thing or place, it can take you to somewhere. If you're looking at it like a travel book, it can take you on an adventure. If you're looking at pictures of loved ones, it can like help you to feel connected, all just through visual stimulation, right? And then hearing, listening to music. We're all really stimulated by different music. Songs can take us to different places. Or even a tape of the ocean or the rain. They can create a visceral experience for us as well. Listening to a podcast or audiobook, something that's interesting to you. Smelling, walking into a garden in the woods and breathing in the smells of nature. I know that most of you, if I say, like the earth after a fresh rain, like you're going to know what that smell is just by having me say that. Um, and lighting a scented candle or some sort of incense. The olfactory system is one of the most powerful systems in terms of our five senses. It can really take us to places. And then using a scented lotion or essential oil. There's a lot of power in the olfactory system for so smell. And then taste, drinking a soothing herbal tea, both is, the taste and the warmth in the mouth, and then cooking your favorite meal and savoring the different flavors is can be really just like a really lovely thing to do for yourself. And then touch, this is kind of like the visceral stuff, the tangible stuff. Taking a bubble bath or Epsom salt bath where you are literally submerging your body in this lovely, touch element. And then petting your cat or dog, that can be really relaxing as well. Putting on your favorite comfy clothing, whether it's something that's like soft or silky or fluffy, whatever that is, and then sinking into like a comfortably fresh made bed, which just kind of encompasses your whole body. But really just kind of thinking about the five senses and what are ways that you can kind of stimulate or comfort or nurture any one of the five senses.
Yeah, I agree. You know, when you were talking about and you said if I said to you the smell of fresh rain, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I closed my eyes and said because I could just smell and it's always the fresh rain, is such a clean smell. And I think most of us can imagine that. And I kind of laughed at myself because I was doing it as Amy was talking about it. But it just proves that point of that our sensory coping skills have such an effect on how we feel, and which is exactly sometimes why our favorite foods do for us. And so switching that out and being able to find the sensory coping skills that work for you because they are individual, person to person, of what's going to work. So really thinking as we're talking through that if what we put on the slides doesn't really match the things that you would choose, that's okay. These are not all inclusive, right, Amy? I mean, these are just a few examples. So if you've already got some sensory coping skills that you use, you really use those and maybe increase them during times where you feel like you would normally emotionally eat. And you might find that you're able to use things that you never even thought you could to decrease emotional eating.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's important to kind of, pay attention when you're doing things you enjoy. What sense is being stimulated? If you like to knit, is it the kind of sensation of having the needles? If you like to walk, is it the sensation of your feet on the ground? Is it, the vision of like taking in whatever you're seeing? Is it, the like the touch element of like, feeling the sun on your face? Is it the smell of like all the smells, or hearing, the leaves rustling? Whatever it is that you're doing, you can often think about what senses are being stimulated in that moment that are loading the pleasurable element.
Definitely. All right. So let's move on to those distraction behaviors. And so I just want to preface this by saying that these are all different kinds of distraction behaviors. I do not believe that people are going, like everyone out there is going to want to mow their lawn to make themselves feel better or distracted instead of eating. I honestly understand that. I'm definitely not a yard work type of person. And if I'm bored, I would rather read a book or watch a good movie than go outside and mow my lawn. But there are actually patients and clients who've come in and said they actually love yard work. They love being outdoors, and it is very distracting and even coping skills for them. So we put up a lot of different activities on here because, again, there's all kinds of different things that people tend to gravitate toward when they're wanting to do different things. So distraction helps us feel better by diverting our attention away from whatever it is that might be stressing us out, or giving us like some stressful or distressing thoughts or feelings. Different things, like I said, work for different people. These behaviors work better, obviously, if it's something that you enjoy that would really grab your attention and keep you absorbed in the activity. So, like I said, read through these. If there's some of these that you're like, I would never do that, that's totally okay. But there might be some that really grab your attention, like, yeah, this is something I already do, or maybe it's something you've done in the past. And for whatever reason, you've gotten away from doing, but you'd like to get back into it. Um, Also, it might actually put in your mind other distraction behaviors that we didn't include on the list, but that would work for you. So, as you can see, I'm not going to read every single one of these, but it does have stuff like that are more like physical, like mowing the lawn or cleaning the car, um, taking a walk or a jog, going to the beach, going for a drive. But it also has stuff where, you can be a little bit more relaxed, like surfing the internet, doing Sudoku or a jigsaw puzzle or a crossword puzzle, reading, calling up a friend, writing, doing those more creative things like painting or drawing. As Amy mentioned earlier, knitting, sewing, crocheting, journaling. So there's all kinds of different behaviors and activities on here, but you can also pick other ones if this puts something else in your mind.
Yeah, I think as Lindsay was saying, it's really just about grabbing your attention and like drawing you into the activity, just as a way to distract from whatever's going on that you don't want to be engaged in. That's something that's distressed or stressful.
All right.
Self-care. Yeah, I feel like this is a big one that I think we're all perpetually working on, right? And self-care is different than coping skills. Self-care is kind of like the long-term set of behaviors, the long-term collection of coping skills, or behaviors that assist you with your physical and mental well-being. So both self-care and coping skills can help us decrease unpleasant feelings. We're going to lean into this a bit more in the self care webinar, but just wanted to kind of touch on this piece because it is important, to be able to think about how do we tend to ourselves? How do we increase our awareness of when we are having an unpleasant feeling or experience and shift into self care? So it's kind of that like catch and redirect. piece.
Definitely. Well said, Amy. Well said.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks.
All right. So we've talked about a lot of stuff, and we wanted to kind of jump into if you were sitting at home and you were thinking this stuff through, how would you create your own treatment plan? So the first thing I always tell a lot of my patients and clients that come in, and especially if they're coming through the bariatric program, you're going to hear it from the dietitians, you're probably going to hear it from the surgeons. But one of the things that I would definitely want someone to do for maybe completely different purposes is actually to log and track what they're doing with their foods, their behaviors, their patterns for at least a week. And as Amy said earlier, this is not about judging. In fact, if you are going to be judgmental, it makes it harder for you guys to switch into that place where you can be observant of what you're doing. So really try to log and track for about 1 week without judgment. You're just trying to learn about yourself. And so you're writing everything down. You're writing down your food choices, what you ate, how much, and any emotions that you felt before or after you ate. And I also tell people we're trying to get a baseline, so don't try to change anything at this point. If you're normally going out and getting fast food on a regular basis, I still want you to do that. I want you to be writing down what your normal behaviors are because that's going to increase your insight. And so it's very important to be completely honest with yourself about your eating behaviors so that we can start to learn and you can start to learn about yourself so that you can make changes. So then from the log, we're going to identify, or you're going to identify, if you're not here with us, what your triggers are so that you can understand what you use food for. If it's a stressful day at work, do you crave refined carbs, right? Do you struggle at the end of the day to cook or prepare a meal and then you choose something convenient, which is something I completely do. If I have not meal planned and prepped for the week, I am not going to want to go home at the end of a work day and spend 30 to 45 minutes making myself a meal, which is why I plan and do my meal planning and prep on the weekend because I know myself well enough to know that I am going to want to Grubhub every single night if I do not have dinner prepared. So, but then also this is, do you eat for comfort, to distress, for reward or celebration? All of those things we've been talking about throughout the day today.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's really about data collection, right? You're really wanting to kind of observe your system of eating. Whenever you're trying to figure out how a system's functioning, you got to collect data and no judgment, just curiosity to really help you understand and reflect on what you're doing and and then getting to the place of figuring out like how to shift it. But at this stage, it's really just data collection.
Definitely. I like that. Data collection.
Yeah.
All right.
So, continuing on with treatment plan, once you know and understand what your relationship with food is and your patterns after you've done the data collection when it comes to nutrition, you may be able to develop your own treatment plan to help you changing the behaviors. Like, so you've collected the data, you've started to kind of get curious about what am I doing? And then you're going to start to kind of think about, like, why am I doing what I'm doing and what do I need to do differently? So for example, from the food log, you learn that you reward yourself on Fridays and at the end of the work week by ordering a pizza and having a couple of ciders. So then you kind of think about, okay, I'm aware that I'm doing this, and you start to get curious, like, is this problematic? So remember, we're coming from a place of curiosity, not judgment. This is an opportunity to learn about yourself. And we're all going to be doing things that are helpful and things that aren't helpful. So we want to encourage all of us to be able to think about what's the drive. Is it an issue? Is it not? So you wrote down that you were stressed on your way home from work. Then you logged eating 5 pieces of pizza, dipping it in ranch or garlic butter, and drinking 2 ciders. Um, so this is the part, like, is it problematic? Well, after the meal, you wrote down that you felt physically uncomfortable. That's not a pleasant feeling. You also logged that you were angry and disappointed with yourself, and because you ate until you felt stuffed. Um, so the next morning, you wrote in your log that you had a headache, your stomach was queasy all day, and your knees and hips hurt and felt achy. So this starts to kind of push us in the direction of realizing this sounds like it's problematic. It's not something that we feel good about. Our bodies don't physically feel good. And when our bodies don't physically feel good, that's kind of, like ripe for us to kind of start being hard on ourselves. So it seems like something's not working for us.
Definitely. All right. So again, we're just going to continue talking about the treatment plan. So now, because you got that log down, and we look at the behavior at this point. So you're looking at a trigger. You get to the end of the week, you're feeling stressed, and you want to reward yourself. The problematic behavior is the physical and the mental part. So physically, you wrote down that you felt stuffed, you had that headache, you felt queasy the next day, and you were aching. Your knees and your hips were aching. And then mentally, you wrote down that you felt angry and disappointed in yourself. So I always tell my patients and clients, what do you want to do instead? This is the part where that's where the judgment starts to become an issue. If you're being really judgmental and you're focused on the judgment of your behavior, it's hard to start to look for solutions. So if you start to do this without judgment, you can start to ask yourself those questions of, what do I want to do instead? If I'm doing a behavior I don't like, what do I want to do instead? So this is where everything we talked together today comes together, right? Your coping skills and distraction behaviors. What would help you decrease your stress or feel rewarded that was not at all about food? So you think of coping skills, you think of distraction behaviors, you make yourself a list of the behaviors that you think would work to meet those foods that food is meeting at this moment. Post that list on your fridge, on your pantry door, next to your sofa recliner. I've actually had patients write it out, take a picture of it with their cell phone and put it as their screensaver because they're always on their phone. So it's right there and can be that visual reminder of what they're working on. So you make a plan of those days where you started to feel like you're using food more often, because we've all got habits and routines. When we do this, now you've collected that data, you've thought about it, so you can start to think of, what would I do instead? So you don't want to wait until the day that you are triggered, because it's very, very difficult in those moments, and especially when it's emotionally driven, that you are going to make a choice that you want to make when you're not feeling emotional. So you don't wait until you're driving home and feeling stressed and exhausted. You want to do it ahead of time. So if I put an example on here, so if you would normally, feel stressed and want to reward yourself on a Friday, maybe think ahead to Friday and say, you know what? Maybe I'll stream a movie, or I'll go rent a movie and watch a movie on Friday nights when I get home. And I will listen to music on my car ride home, because listening to music is de-stressing for me. Also, you do want to have this caveat of having something that you're going to be eating that maybe you would still enjoy, but is portion controlled, maybe feels like it's a healthier choice to you. Um, or maybe you would treat yourself, but you would keep that portion controlled so that you don't tend to overdo and then feel bad about it, both mentally and physically afterward.
I love the notion of you saying, like, don't wait, have a plan beforehand because you already know that that's a trigger point for you. So if you can have a plan beforehand, you're much more likely to, enact that plan as opposed to trying to kind of wing it in a moment when you're stressed, you're struggling.
Definitely. All right.
So here we have an example treatment plan, so we've got the triggers identified. You're feeling stressed, you want a reward. You've got the problem behaviors, the food choice. What we're choosing when we feel stressed and want a reward is not ideal. The portions, not ideal. And then the other problem is that then we wind up feeling bad both mentally and physically. So then building on that, okay, so we've got the triggers, we've got the problem behaviors. What do we want to replace with? We want to come up with some coping skills that are preferable, like things that we actually enjoy that are going to de-stress us or allow us to feel like we're rewarding ourselves in a way that we feel good about. Or distraction behavior, something that's going to, pull us away from the stress, that's going to pull us away from, like the unpleasant experience. So the action plan is listening to the music on the way home to tend to the stress, streaming a movie on the Friday night, that's the reward, and meal planning and prepping for Friday dinners, like a treat meal or a cauliflower pizza, to be able to kind of, like actually do something different, like have that plan in place. And then the maintenance behaviors, like make a list of your coping skills to keep this going for the next time and the next time. Post your list around your house, around your home, or like Lindsay said, take a picture of it and put it on your screensaver so it's right there, it's accessible. And then be consistent with your plan. This is a hard one. This is practice. Like you got to do your best to try and be as consistent as possible, and tell someone about your plan. This is actually really helpful, creating accountability. You're asking for support, you're speaking it out loud. It's much more likely if you do that that you're going to follow through. So this is just an example treatment plan, but you can tweak it, to whatever works or you want to be able to try out and test for yourself.
Definitely. All right. Okay, so, you know, like we said when we first started, this is just us going through why we emotionally eat, and then how do we start to change those behaviors, giving you guys like a little quick summary of how for yourselves you could start to kind of identify your behaviors, get yourself a little treatment plan. You can do one of those treatment plans on just a regular sheet of paper, like grab yourself a notebook, and just jot that down so you can look at what are my triggers, you know exactly like that last slide was. And so now we're going to go over some final thoughts and reminders. Some of this is us saying the same thing over again, but really to hit home the things that we think are important before we take off today. So, like I said earlier, most people emotionally eat from time to time. That is a very normal behavior. And honestly, if you look forward to your eggs in the morning, that's still emotional, but because it's working you toward your goal, no one ever thinks about that like it's a bad thing. They're just like, oh, that's protein. It's low calorie. I'm meeting my goals, even though you enjoy and look forward to it. But because it's meeting the goals, we don't tend to get really judgmental about it. I also want you guys to keep in mind that no one is perfect. I'm not perfect with menu planning, right? So no one's perfect with it. You're not going to be perfect. If you strive for perfection, it is going to lead to those feelings of judgment that we've been talking about today, where people will feel discouraged with themselves. They'll feel guilty. They'll have shame. And that's the last thing that we actually want people to be doing when they're trying to make health related changes for themselves. And we've all heard of diet mentality, this all or nothing thinking. It's not healthy for us. It is a false belief system that tells you that you actually don't deserve happiness until you've met your goal. You don't deserve to feel well. You don't deserve to feel that you're doing healthy things until you're actually at that goal or in that weight loss place. It involves, like I said earlier, perfectionistic thinking, which is not a healthy place for us to be. It labels foods as if they're good or bad. I just want to put this out there. Foods do not have a personality. They are not good or bad. They're just food. They're just fuel. So really trying to take a step back from looking at foods as good or bad. They are what they are. They are pizza, they are pasta, they are chips, they are chocolate, they are eggs, they are protein. It's just about food choice. If you're going to be overly restrictive and prohibitive in your food choices, so I've had clients or patients come in and say, well, I'm never going to have sugar again. I'm never going to have bread again. I'm never going to have pasta. The problem with this is that it tends to lead to struggles where people are feeling very deprived. It kind of sets them up to feel like they're not going to be able to be successful instead of saying, those foods don't necessarily lead to my goals. So maybe I want to decrease those foods rather than tell myself I'm never ever going to eat them again is a better way to look at it. But again, this all falls in that diet mentality that we've all heard probably most of our lives. And so it's very easy to click into this thinking. And we're just trying to get you guys to look at this from more of a very fluid place of, there are going to be days where you feel like you're hitting it out of the park and you're doing everything correctly. And there are going to be days where maybe your best felt like 5%, but it was your best in that day. So we're just looking at improving things as we move forward instead of looking for perfection.
I felt like my body relaxed, like just hearing you say that, Lindsay. I feel like it's a powerful thing. You're talking about the ebbs and flows that are realistic, right? And also just having self-compassion for ourselves instead of like, feeling like, it's got to be all or nothing, because that's a setup, it's a setup for anyone and everyone.
Definitely. All
Yeah.
right. Okay.
So, more final thoughts. We want to encourage you to shift your mindset to think of food as fuel, energy, nourishment to kind of keep you going over the course of a day. And remember to create a treatment plan for times when you're feeling stressed or exhausted or upset or down or wanting to celebrate. The more that you can plan ahead, the less you're going to be relying on the parts of yourselves that are struggling, because we don't want you to have to make a plan from a place of struggle. But if you have a plan in place, it can kind of support you and be a little bit of like a safety net when you are struggling. And no, if you enjoy certain food choice that you tend to overeat, plan that choice into your menu as a treat because you know, like you're going to need for that to happen. And make sure that the portion's controlled. So, like, only buy one slice of cake instead of buying the whole cake. Try to be mindful of your eating choices and get curious about why you're eating. What's the drive? What's the need underlying? And ask yourself, like, pause for a moment. Why am I hungry? And when's the last time I ate? What am I really needing right now? Taking that pause point to kind of like look inside and self reflect and expect missteps. They're going to happen. It's a part of the process, just like Lindsay was saying. It's an ebb and a flow. Some days you're going to feel on it, other days you're not. And on those days when you're not, you got to have self compassion and have concrete plans for how to get back on track when those moments occur, those safety nets to kind of just put you right back on track when you fall off.
Definitely. And one thing I want to point out, it's a little bit of a pet peeve for me, and it's a part of diet mentality. So you'll notice I put treat in here and I put it in the quotes, right, Amy? The reason I did that is I have a lot of, well, I would say many, many people say this. Well, I cheated or I'm going to have a cheat day. Cheat implies, just by the word, it implies you're doing something wrong or incorrect. I'm not a big fan of that word. So I'll always try, and I understand people are like, isn't it just semantics? Really, it's not. The things that we say to ourselves on a regular basis set us up for how we feel about what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and even our behavior. So really try to shift that. And instead of saying, I'm going to cheat today, say, I'm going to treat myself today. You can still plan it in as a part of your day. So if you're getting to the end of the day and you're thinking to yourself, I'd really like to go out with my friends to Taco Tuesday. So we know that you're maybe going to have a lot more calories or carbs. If you've got that planned in, then you'll know already through the day, like what would still help you meet your goals that day. Maybe the rest of the day you're going more protein heavy and a little bit lower carb just to factor that in. So you're not really ever going on or off a diet, right? This is your lifestyle and you get to treat yourself. That's how a lifestyle is. It's realistic. It's not one of those all or nothing extremely restrictive places where you're never ever going to eat something that you enjoy ever again because you're trying to be healthy. It's you get to treat yourself as a healthy person. And I like the word treat over the word cheat. I just wanted to throw that in as one of my last thoughts too.
I really appreciate you saying that. I feel like, the words do have, like psychological or emotional loading, Treating yourself feels like, something good as opposed to cheating feels like you've done something wrong. And I hear a lot of people say like, I was bad. It's like, no, you weren't bad. Like, you might have made a poor choice that you don't feel good about, but it's like, a very different like emotional reaction to the difference of those words, even though yeah, it's not semantics. I so appreciate you bringing that piece up. I couldn't agree more.
Yes. All right. The psychologists are in agreement, guys.
Bam.
Usually we are. So, all right. And just a little bit of a wrap up here. So, you know, we definitely want you to remember that if you are struggling with emotional or boredom eating, please call the bariatric clinic. We are here as a resource for you, always here as a resource to help you. And we have those skills and that training where that are without judgment. so that we can sit there, we can talk with you, you can tell us those things that you're struggling with, and we can help, especially if you've already tried it on your own. Maybe you put together your example treatment plan, you watched the webinar and you put it together, and maybe you figured out some stuff, but you're still really struggling. If you're struggling, of course, we want you to be able to feel like we're a resource for you.
Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching our webinar. We hope you found it helpful. Um, and just keep on the lookout for the other webinars that we are going to be putting together for you.
Yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you, Amy.